So good morning again. I'm Rev Natasha Eckholm. I don't think I introduced myself earlier, so I'm going to do it now. And I'm a staff minister here at Center for Spiritual Living. And again, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our Sunday service this morning, wherever you are here in the sanctuary, joining us online. I see some of our members here, Mary and Judy and Dee and Len. So glad to see you joining us online. And for everybody else who's joining us on Facebook or at a later time, we're really glad to know that you are with us. So this month, our theme is holy boldness. And boldness is a word that I think embodies something that we really sometimes wrestle with. And that is the need to be really intentional to experience what we want to experience. You can't be bold if you're sitting on your chair. You can't be bold if you're waiting for something to happen. Boldness is something that happens when you choose for it to happen. You have to get out there. And what that means is that you might have to get a little uncomfortable. How many people hate feeling uncomfortable? Yeah, me too. It's challenging, isn't it? And scary, right? We worry about what might happen. I have a granddaughter who I just spent 2 weeks with. And what if is one of her favorite phrases. What if those kids don't like me? What if I forget my lunch? What if? On and on and on. And we've spent a lot of time talking about what if, because we know in our teaching is that if we spend all of our time worrying about what if, there's going to be a lot more what if that we experience, right? Rather than what we would like to experience, which in her case was having a lot of fun with kids at camp and eating lunch. So, you know, sometimes our wants and our needs are modest, and sometimes they're bigger, and that's all part of our life journey. There is something in life itself, isn't there, that invites us to want to live, to grow, to experience more. It's a kind of impulse, right? Somehow that mysterious impulse that led to our physical formation, that brought us into this physical experience. It's an energy, and it is continuous throughout our lives, right? It is seeking a greater expression. In our philosophy, we call that the divine. It is, whether we call it spirit, God, universal energy, whatever term we feel most comfortable using, there is an energetic to that life force that is expressing itself through us in every moment. And we can resist it, we can ignore it, we can allow things to get in the way of it, but it won't stop because that is its very nature. So since it won't stop, we have choice. We can intentionally choose to seek or embody something greater, right? Or we can intentionally choose to sit on the sideline, to worry about the what if, not to move forward. In her meditation, Jody mentioned the example of Harriet Tubman. And that's, I think, a very apt one this week. We just celebrated Juneteenth on Wednesday. You know, what happens with a person who feels called in the moment to do something extraordinary, to be bold, because she was indeed profoundly bold. She risked her life many, many times, not only to bring herself to freedom, but to help others. That is the kind of ultimate expression of boldness, is it not? When a person is willing to risk so much for something so profound and meaningful for themselves. And I'm not saying that we all have to go out and risk our lives right now, but I'm saying that growth calls upon us to really dig deep for what is within us, what resources that we have. And that is that divine expression that was in her, that brought her, that she listened to, that led her to take the actions that she took. That very same divine is seeking to express itself through each and every one of us, through the gifts that we have been born with and those that we acquire along the path of life. And it is our attitude about this journey, our willingness to engage that boldness, that really results in the kind of life that we experience. And here's the really wonderful thing about it. It does not matter what has happened up until this point in life, in your life. Have you hung back? Have you stepped forward? Every moment is a new moment. Every moment has the potential and the possibility for something amazing to happen. So today we're talking about spiritual growth, and some people like to talk about this kind of using the metaphor of height that Jody also mentioned, that idea of ascension, of reaching higher, of looking higher. And that metaphor explores kind of this idea that part of that process is having higher vision, of seeing a bigger horizon, of seeing bigger possibilities. So that from that standpoint, we can't move forward if we're looking down, right? We have to be looking up and out. We have to elevate our vision. And that's a metaphor that is a profound one, and I think we can understand how it can help us envision this idea of unlimited potential and resources. For myself, I think I resonate with a different image a little bit more. And that, let's see, are we there yet? No. It's more of expansion. So you see in that image of sort of the idea of the expanding galaxy or expanding universe. And it's also an image you may have heard me talk about previously as embodied in the image of a spiral, right? A nautilus shell or a flower or a hurricane, right? All of these natural structures that have this visual element of expansion, of always becoming something greater. And part of what I love about that is that I don't have to go somewhere else. It's happening exactly where I am. But whichever metaphor works for you, and there's no right or wrong here, this is really about what helps you be in the place of growth, what helps you allow yourself to think new things, to take risks, to move into new experiences. Whatever helps you is what's good for you. So however we envision it, we first have to really become aware of and address hidden beliefs that are getting in our way. Does anybody have ideas and beliefs that get in their way that they've noticed from time to time? I'm seeing some laughs here. I'm seeing some, are you kidding? Right, exactly. Because that is part of our human experience. From the moment that we arrive in this life, right, on the planet, in human community, people are telling us how things are, how they work, how they're supposed to work, who we're supposed to be, what we can aspire to or not aspire to. And all of those messages are often very loving and well-meaning, but they don't always support us in being our full, authentic selves. And depending on the particular circumstances and our personalities, and all of those specifics, will often keep us sort of stuck in some place in life. That's part of the power of the religious science philosophy of new thought thinking, is the idea that the limitations that we experience are almost entirely imposed by ourselves, ultimately, right? Because, of course, as children, we don't have the choice to accept those messages, but as adults, we can change our minds and think about things in a new way. So, I wanted to focus for a moment on one of our principles, and I think it's really important to remember that in Science of Mind, we have a fundamental set of principles. They're in our Declaration of Principles, and they really are the undergirding of our teaching. So this one is, we believe in our own soul, our own spirit, and our own destiny, for we understand that the life of all is God. And what's important to me about that declaration is that means it is our life. We have agency. We have power over that life. And ultimately, that we have a responsibility for what we choose to do with the life that we have. We each have a destiny. The collective aspect of it, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is that the life of all is God. We're not in this alone. We are in this together. And we can support each other in this journey. So if we all have to play a part in the experience of life, in the experience of abundance, in the experience of community, we have to participate in the spiritual laws. And that's one of the great things about being part of a spiritual community. You learn about what those spiritual laws are and how to use them, and you learn about spiritual tools that will help you use them. So where we are in the divine flow of our lives right now really reflects what our heart's desires are and what our ability has been to realize that up until this moment. You know, we know that things are more complicated than just what we think, right? We know that we can strive for things but feel stuck, and the reality is we live in community, we live with people, we live in a global society with millions of people, so it's not just about our own individual beliefs, right? We have to still engage with the issue of there are millions and millions and millions of other people with their own beliefs and their own history, and all of that is working at the same time. But we do have agency as individuals and as a community, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. So, what can that look like? Ernest Holmes says, "We are surrounded by an infinite possibility. It is goodness, life, law, and reason, and it wishes to express through us all of this wonderful good." Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's so much good out there. This is part of our work, is to connect with that, because it's really not about looking out. It's about looking in and creating a pathway for that good, that intelligence, that love, that life to move through us into the world. And that is really part of what is so powerful about our teaching. We are not waiting for a power above to decide what to do with us in our lives. We are already here as expressions of that intelligent, creative force, and it is waiting for us to allow that to move through us in creating something yet more wonderful, something greater yet to be, something that has not been experienced by us as individuals or us collectively yet. So as we kind of engage with this idea of spiritual growth, we begin to notice that growth. We begin to notice that things are changing. We begin to notice that we're reacting to things in new ways. We see things more clearly. We hear things more audibly. We begin to notice that things are not as difficult as they were before. Sometimes people think of this as sort of the spiritual equivalent of mountain climbing, right? When you first start climbing, oh man, it's hard, it feels heavy. Your muscles are not very strong, you don't know how. But as you keep going, right, maybe you hit a little plateau, you get a little rest, right? Your muscles start getting stronger. Now as you go up the next ridge, you can start feeling like you're experience something, you're getting stronger, and you're also able to be more intentional. You're essentially able to exercise that boldness that we were talking about. And all of the tools that you can use along the way as you're climbing, which in a spiritual metaphor would be prayer, meditation, reflection, chanting, physical practices that involve movement. All of those tools help you keep climbing farther and farther. And remember, you know, if you're a person climbing Mount Everest, you have other people with you, don't you? You don't have to do it all by yourself. So that as you get closer to that peak, you are both empowered but embodying something greater than you even knew was in you to begin with, right? And as we mentioned before, of course, this can be a really uncomfortable process. If you're climbing that mountain, boy, your muscles hurt at the end of the day, don't they? And I'm not saying that spiritual growth has to be painful, but it is part of the nature of our physical experience that growth happens with stress. And so there's always some discomfort. Part of what we hope to do in our spiritual growth process as individuals and in community is to support each other, right? So essentially when you're working with someone else, when you're part of a community or you're working with a practitioner, it's like the spiritual equivalent. Don't take this too far. You know, someone's helping you rub that muscle balm on you, right? So you feel a little bit better, right? Bringing you a cup of tea as you go along. And it's hard to do that in our society because we live in the society of the easy and the immediate. Did you ever see an ad for something that said, it's okay to feel uncomfortable? No, I don't think so, right? Every product you see is how to get through it, how to get through everything that you experience in the quickest, easiest way. And don't get me wrong, I am perfectly happy to experience ease and grace in my spiritual growth. But I recognize that that is, I think we have a kind of false expectation in our society about that dimension. So I think it's just important to talk about that. If we're just starting out in learning more about this teaching, for those of you who are starting out, this is the benefit of taking classes. You kind of have company in doing this, and also examples. I know that when I first started my Science of Mind studies with Reverend Suzette, I won't say how many years ago because I don't like thinking about how old that makes me now, but I was completely perplexed by how you could be like she was, as I perceived it at that time. I could see where I was in my life at that point. I had a little glimmer of imagining where I wanted to be, but how do you get there? It seemed insurmountable to me. And, you know, I remember asking her one time, and she just said, well, you just have to go through the process, right? You can't go around it. I don't know if some of you know that children's song, right, about, you know, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you can't go around it, you got to go through it, right? We have to go through it. That is part of the nature of our human lived experience. But the good news is we don't have to do it alone. And it helps when we see examples around us, when we are encouraged, and we can see, well, okay, I don't know how to get there, but she got there. She got to her there, right? Not necessarily my there, but she got to her there. So there must be a path that I can find to get through to. And I'm glad to say that I did find my path. And for those of you who know me, you know that I found my husband, I found my life work in chaplaincy. I have found my path to the things that are meaningful. And it didn't happen overnight, but it happens day by day, step by step, conversation by conversation, prayer by prayer. All of that is the nature of life. And most importantly, it was inside me all the time. Rumi says, everything in the universe is within you. Ask all from yourself. And that doesn't mean your small self, the small self that doesn't know how to get through. That means the divine self that already knows everything that you need to know. But you have to be willing to ask the question, to have the boldness to ask the question, and not sit simply waiting for it to show up. You have to pay attention. I heard a really fascinating story on the radio this week that I want to share with you that really spoke to me of this idea of paying attention as part of the nature of spiritual growth. Ernest Holmes tells us, communion with the Spirit is one of the greatest privileges of life. By communion, we mean silently entering into divine harmony and beauty until we feel that harmony and beauty in our own souls and our own minds. And sometimes that can happen when a person least expects it. So here's the story that I heard. It was about a Dutch man named Joran van Klaveren. And his story was reported on a show called The World that was broadcast on KPBS a few days ago. He is, or was, a far-right Dutch politician, and he served as the right-hand man of the leader of the far-right party in the Netherlands. And he was the architect of that party's intensely anti-Islamic views. He described Islam as an evil that should have no place in Dutch society. He wanted the Quran to be banned. He wanted mosques and schools, Islamic mosques and schools, to be closed. He was very extreme in his views. He voiced these and he propelled others in these views. He was raised in a very strict Protestant household and very radicalized by 9/11 and other events that took place in the Netherlands. And he felt that it was his mission to do this work, to protect his homeland. So eventually he decided he was going to write a book about the threat that Islam posed to his society. And he began to, as he worked on this book, he began to research the representations of God in Christianity and in Islam. And he started to get confused because it wasn't really what he was expecting. It didn't conform to his ideas of what that looked like. So he began to talk to scholars and to clergy. And eventually he began to read Islamic texts himself. And as he went further and further in doing this research, he realized that his idea, that he no longer believed the ideas that he had had. And he decided, after having spent many months working on this book, to abandon the book because he could no longer assert those beliefs. So on the day that he decided to abandon the book, he was in his study and there was a bookshelf filled with all the books that he had been reading on this project. And evidently the bookshelf was so full that it fell down. And when he went to pick up the books, he picked up a Quran, and he said that it was open, and he put his thumb to on the top as he was picking it up, and he saw that it was on a verse that said, "It is not the eyes that are blind, but the heart." And when he saw that phrase, "It is not the eyes that are blind, but the heart," he felt that was being spoken directly to him. And he kept thinking about it, and he slept on it, and when he woke up in the morning, he said he felt completely at peace. And he decided to convert to Islam. Yeah, wow, exactly. And this is just funny sort of postscript. He went to the kitchen where his wife was, and he told her what he was going to do, and he asked her if she was okay with that, and she said, "Well, if you're a Muslim, are you going to be okay being married to a Christian? Because I'm a Christian." And he said, "Yes." She said, "Well, fine. Okay, let's wash the dishes." And he has gone on now to found an organization called the Islam Experience Center in the Netherlands, and they are devoted to the work of creating understanding about Islam and promoting understanding in Dutch society. Now, this is not where you would have expected that he would end up, is it? From that work that he had done before, from the views that he had before, from what he believed before. But he paid attention. He paid attention, and that transformed him. And so he made a choice to become now, right, a very bold choice in his circumstances. He's paid a lot for those choices. He's received numerous death threats, as had his family. There was a huge backlash to this because he had been such a prominent exponent of these negative views. People couldn't believe that he was now expressing something so different. And the point of this story is not, is Christianity right? Is Islam right? It's what is right for each of us in our spiritual journey, and how we allow that to express itself through us. And in his case, it led to the commitment now to want to promote greater understanding, not just for himself as an individual, right? And he thought about not telling people, right? Because, wow, he could anticipate what was going to happen. But when he spoke with an imam about it, the imam said, "Well, that's a choice you could make. He said, but think of what you have done up until this point. I think it's really important for you to own this and bear witness to this, right? And to do what you can to help make things better, right? That we all have a spiritual responsibility as human beings to make things better where we can and when we can. And that is also part of our vision as Centers for Spiritual Living, right? We have a set of beliefs and goals and affirmations that we call the Global Heart Vision, right? A world that works for everyone. And so that's part of what we also have the opportunity to engage with in the process of spiritual growth, is not only to think about our own private personal journey, but also to think about the nature of our community and what we want to do both in our community as family, our community as here at OHM, Centers for Spiritual Living, our community in San Diego, our national community, and our global community. You know, when we talk about, some of us, I'm sure, are familiar with the phrase beloved community, and that's known to many through the work and writings and speakings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who talked about this vision of the beloved community. The beloved community is the place where that is free of hatred and poverty and hunger, right? The place where we engage with God, with the divine, and we see God and the divine in everyone around us, which is a pretty good example, I think, of what we believe in Centers for Spiritual Living, right? We see God, we see the divine in everyone around us, and we believe in the idea of a world that works for everyone, that is free of all the ills. Now, is that going to happen really easily? No. Can we as individuals do something to bring more of that forward? 100%. And it is up to each of us to think about what that could look like, what we can do. And to that end, I really want to invite each and every one of us to think about how we can do that in a more intentional, indeed a more bold way. How can we participate more here at OHM Center for Spiritual Living, or at whatever spiritual center we want to be engaged in? It matters what we do from a spiritual standpoint. It matters what we do for ourselves as individuals, and it matters what we do for our community. You know, Ernest Holmes tells us, it is right that we should be successful, for otherwise spirit is not expressed. The divine cannot lack for anything. So, how can we do that? So, I wanted to share, and I think Sylvia has the copies. I want to invite everybody to consider a spiritual practice this week. And it comes from a worksheet that Reverend Chris Alexander at Celebration Center for Spiritual Living in Virginia developed. It's called How Balanced Are You? And it is a worksheet that gives you an opportunity to look at some of the different aspects of your life. So mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, life purpose, social, environment, financial. To think about where you feel like you are in this moment and where you would like to experience expansion, where you would like to experience something greater. And don't worry, you don't have to do these all at the same time, right? We all have opportunities for growth in every one of those areas. But simply to take a little time to identify what that could look like for you. What is an area that you might like to experience something greater in? What might that look like? What action could you take this week to move yourself forward? And if you're having trouble kind of sorting that out, identifying that, well, that is the wonderful thing about being in spiritual community. You have people to talk with about it. So you're welcome to reach out to our practitioners and our ministers for some help in clarifying those thoughts for you and identifying what is really most important to you as far as having that something greater experience. Okay. So, as we come to the end of our time this morning, I want to invite you again to really think about that idea of being bold. How many people right here this morning feel like they're ready to be bold this week? Not saying today, but this week. All right, come on, everybody. You can do it. Yeah, you can do it. So with that, recognizing your own potential for agency, for boldness, for action, I want to also invite you to think about how can you support someone else in being bold, right? Which doesn't mean telling them what to do, right? It's for each person to discern their what to do. But what it does mean is paying attention. It means listening to what people are saying to you. Because we're often telling each other where we really want to express something greater and kind of looking for encouragement. Have you ever noticed that? And you're kind of waiting for someone to say, oh yeah, good idea, before you feel like you're willing to take that risk for the good idea. And while we can say, well, it would be great if you were just bold enough to do it on your own and weren't depending on other people, it's our humanness showing up, right? So there's another choice, to pay attention and to support others in being bold in their lives. Because when we can all be doing that together, I think we really are unlimited in what we can experience and accomplish together. When we can all be holding that vision of the container as wide as the sea, thank you, Leslie, then there really is nothing that can stop that. So with that, I want to invite you to join me in our affirmation today. So please stand, and we'll do it the 3 ways that we talk about: quietly, strongly, and boldly at the end, okay? All right. So today I expand my spiritual awareness and express greater and greater good in every form. Today I express my spiritual awareness and express greater and greater good in every form. Today, I expand my spiritual awareness and express greater and greater good in every form. Thank you. Namaste.